Thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies, and this video is Christmas a Spiritual Symbol by Manly P. Hall, an article taken from Horizon, Volume 6, Number 3, Winter 1946. Christmas a Spiritual Symbol. In consideration of the season of the year, we should pause for a moment and consider Christmas itself and its meaning to those of us who are concerned with self-improvement and service to others. We hear enacted over the radio what is called the first Christmas, the birth of Jesus in the little town of Bethlehem. Of course, we know that was not the first Christmas. Christmas as a festival has existed since the dawn of time. As soon as the human mind became aware of the phenomena of nature, men began to recognize the annual motion of the sun, and gradually the meaning of this annual mystery, which they called the long night, dawned upon them. They realized that each year, at the period which we call the winter solstice, the sun seemed to be further away, leaving the world in darkness for a longer period than at any other time of the year. This became part of their religion and philosophy, and as the sun's action upon the seasons affected the harvest, primitive men, who were mostly agrarians, began to realize that the annual life of the sun was closely linked to the security of the human being. In the most remote periods of time, the winter solstice was celebrated because it was after the solstice that the sun increased in light. All the countries in the northern hemisphere became aware of this mystery and built it into their spiritual convictions as a symbol of the annual restoration of the life of the world. Of course, we have many times discussed the character of Santa Claus. We know this little image, this little figure, was derived directly from the Egyptian Bes, the god of the little children, the bringer of secret gifts. But the Greeks recognized also the relationship between the winter solstice and the god of Saturn. Now, Saturn was the aged individual with a long beard who carried in one hand a scythe and in the other an hourglass. Santa Claus was the deity of time, and time was very important. Time was opportunity, time was privilege, time was the framework of action. The human being who had time could achieve, and this astronomical mystery of the year, the annual restoration of life, the winter solstice, became the symbol of the gift of time. Time was the opportunity to grow, to serve, to attain all things natural, and to distribute them to mankind. Time was the gift of the gods. It was in time that man must perfect himself. It was in time he must perform his good works. In time he must achieve and attain, and in time must consecrate himself. The use of time became one of the supreme mysteries of human thinking. A simple example of our time problem comes to us today in our Western thinking as soon as we begin to consider the fact that time is money. Time is more than money. Time is something money cannot buy, and when our time is gone, no wealth in the world can add a day to it. And yet the use of time is one of the supreme proofs of integrity and culture. As the ancient Chinese observed, the dignity of the use of time is symbolic of the superior human being. To waste time is to waste life. To waste time is to break faith with the great cycles of nature in which we exist. I think I have told you before the story of the time when the great Chinese statesman General Zheng was the guest of General Grant. It was when the railroads were being developed in this country. As a special honor, the president invited the Prime Minister of China to accompany him on a record-breaking trip of a crank train. With a watch in his hand, the president called attention to the starting time, and when the train drew into the station, at the end of the trip, General Grant turned to the Chinese statesman and said, "Earl, this train made the run in 5 minutes less time than any train has ever made the trip before. We have saved 5 minutes. Earl Lung Jung replied, "Yes, Mr. President, and now what shall we do with the 5 minutes? This is our problem today. Hundreds of thousands of human beings are being hurt and killed in the haste of traffic. We are all trying to save minutes, seconds, often at the price of life and limb. Why? What are we going to do with the time? What is the individual who has wasted 60 years of life going to do with the half minute saved in traffic? A certain amount of time must be used in which to make a living, and by making a living we can buy a certain amount of time back for our own use, time in which to grow spiritually beautiful. Let us use this time to the best advantage." Ancient Cronus at the winter solstice bestowed on human beings the gift of a new year, a gift of the restoration of time, an opportunity to perfect all things within themselves. He gave his people time in which to build a better world, time in which to educate children, time in which to perfect their own thoughtfulness and meditation, time in which to reform, regenerate, and revitalize the necessary structures of existence. 5,000 years ago, the Egyptians worshipped the symbol of the winter solstice as a rededication of humanity to the great laws of life, the great privilege of cycles in which time is perfected. The ancient Egyptians gave thanks, not for the gift of presents, brought in exchange for material wealth, but for the supreme gift, the gift of life itself. They believed man should demand nothing from the gods, but should be eternally grateful for the opportunity which nature affords, the opportunity to unfold and perfect all things. In ancient Syria and Babylon, they also had a ceremony at the solstice. With them, the little green tree, the pine or acacia, was the symbol of life that survived the mystery of the long night. They adorned these little trees with symbols of life and growth, originally the fruits of the harvest, and the little glass balls and trinkets on our Christmas tree represents the fruits of the harvest. So the use of the pine tree as the symbol of the winter solstice is at least 4,000 or 5,000 years old. In the Northland, among the Celtic people, the Druids had their ceremony. When the time came, calculated by the position of the heavenly bodies. In their great temples, such as those of Karnak and Stonehenge, they worshiped the mystery of the sun deity. When the calculated time came, they sent word to all their priests. And in ancient Brittany, they all gathered together in their nocturnal groves, and every light was extinguished. With the putting out of the old lights, with the extinguishing of the old fires, the Druids consecrated their people and themselves to the annual creation of a new life. The old fires were symbolic of the old life, with its fears, its animosities, its hates, and its debts. Everything in the human consciousness not beautiful was extinguished that night. Nothing was carried over to the new opportunity to overshadow and burden the new lives of the people. The night the fires went out, all the old things ceased to live. Old enmities died. Old debts ceased to be. The one thing the human being can bring to opportunity is a clean life, a clean mind, and a clean heart. How can we make this coming year a great and beautiful year if before it is born we limit and restrict it by bringing over all the old unfinished negations and restrictions that made up the past? We cannot do this. As the Druids put out the old fires, the human being should cause to die within himself all that is not beautiful, useful, and necessary. With the first rays of the dawning sun, the ancient Druid priest, watching from the high hills, saw in that first radiant light the promise of a new pact between God and man. The new year was come, and with it would come a new consecration. With the appearance of the first rays of the sun, the priest rekindled the fire upon the altar, and all the fires of Brittany and Gaul were lit from the great flame upon the altar. This new flame was symbolical of new homes, new fraternities, new understanding, and new dedication of life to that long ray of light that has lightened every man who ever came into the world. It is the same in Far Asia, the Buddhist in Asia, in Tibet, and other far-off lands of Asia also have their ceremonies of the annual birth of the sun, to their meditative way of life. The first rays of the light after the winter solstice sends its long beam into the heart, where it flashes upon the golden roofs of the pagoda of the heart. And here the eternal Buddha is reborn in the heart of the priest, as he reconsecrates himself to the service of life, and his own life shall become a sun that will send life and hope to all life that exists in the 33 worlds of space. Everywhere from the dawn of time, this great ceremony has been kept as a significant pact, and the gift that the gods bring to us is the gift of life, the gift of the newborn sun, a new harvest and new crops, new dawns in which we shall live to see the rising of the sun. And in these new dawns, we shall have a new opportunity to dedicate all we are and have to the supreme work of the perfection of our time. This is our duty and our privilege, and the most blessed gift that the ancient ones gave to us is the opportunity to renew annually their pledge to the world. And though we be small and faint-hearted, although it is hard to grow up, although we are selfish when we would be unselfish, weak when we would be strong, and thoughtless when we would be thoughtful, yet if within our hearts we try, if in our souls we are consecrated to the desire, if in every part of our consciousness we are resolved to grow, to become beautiful, to become wise, as long as that consecration is within ourselves, so surely will the sun be born again. So surely will there exist in nature a time and place in which to grow. The gods give us this time and this place, and for these things we are truly thankful, and we offer our sacred religious act, our perfect religious performance, our sublime religious conviction, that in this time and place given to us under the sun, sustained and warmed by the light of eternal truth, we shall reconsecrate our lives to that constant prayer of good works well done, by which we keep faith with the deity God who is born again for us each year, and shall continue to be born until the last of creatures has completed its work. Nirvana and high explosives. On one occasion, while Buddha was preaching to his disciples, he was asked to describe the state of nirvana. He is said to have compared the dissolution of the personality into the universal state with the disappearance of gunpowder when it is lighted. From this, it would appear that India was aware of the existence of gunpowder more than 500 years before the beginning of the Christian era. See Temples and Elephants by Karl Bach, 1883. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.